you should have the insides looking like a skinny tie. Don't worry if it's not perfect, although you're going to have to try really hard to get as straight of a line as you can, because if you're too far off, it can really screw things up. So next you're going to lay the whole thing down on your ironing board. By the way, at this point you want to make sure that your iron has been turned on and set to the silk setting. It works better if it's been heating for a while. So you're going to lay the iron and the ironing board out, and you're going to put your tie flat down on it. And at this point, you can actually put the insides of the tie back into its little pocket. Make sure that lines up. And you're going to see that this wants to fold on its natural creases that have been there for 30 years or whatever. But we're not going to let that happen, and that's what the iron is for. So you want to make sure that the guts of the tie are as straight as they can be. And then you're going to take one side, and you're going to fold it until the line comes up to the inside portion. And this can be a little bit hard, but you'll be able to feel it. Try to get it as straight as possible. And then, once you get your iron set to silk, you want to make a new crease, which is what we're going to do here. This can take a while. You might have to do it several times to actually get it really solid. So go ahead and do that. And then, once you have that set, and you feel like you have a good crease, you can actually go ahead and you can start trimming some of this extra slack off. But I warn you, don't take too much. Start very minimally. Go with maybe an inch off, because sometimes you're going to end up a little bit short on fabric. Once you have that next portion ironed over, you're going to take the other side and you're going to fold the flap so that your two ends come together. Now, I haven't actually cut or stitched anything yet, so bear with me, but you get the idea. Now, more likely than not, one side is going to way overlap the other. And in that case, your seam is probably going to come all the way to the side. You can actually see with this first tie that I did, the seam is a little bit off center. Now, that doesn't bother me at all. I'm not a great seamstress, for lack of a better word, and frankly, people don't see the back of your tie anyway. But if you really want to get it, there is a way that you can trim the sides just right so that you have it lined up perfectly in the center like it would be if you bought it. So once you go ahead and you line up your seam, the most important thing is going to be the bottom part right here. So if you set it up right, this is going to make a properly shaped end to your tie. You can see with this one that it's even, it's symmetrical, it looks how it should. This can probably be the most difficult part of the entire project. The second tie that I made, I spent the entire time trying to figure out how to get the shape just right. So if you can't get it, just keep messing with it. Keep using that iron. Keep pressing it when you can. That's going to be the trick here. Once you get this shape, then you're ready to start your pinning. I recommend ironing as much as possible, because if you don't, you're going to lose that nice crease that's going to keep things together, because it wants to go back to the old crease. It wants to go back to the way it's been for the last several years. And you don't want that, because that's not the shape of the tie that you're going for now. So then once you get your seams all lined up the way you want it, go ahead and take your pins and pin just all the way up the seam. I don't care how you do it. I don't care how many pins you put in. The important thing is that it's going to hold it together. Now, if you're new at pinning and you don't really know what you're doing, the key is that you don't want to pin too close to the seam here, because you need to be able to get the needle and thread out. Finally, you're ready to do your sewing. Now, this isn't as scary as it seems. It did take me a little bit of time to figure out the best way to do it. The important thing to do is you need black thread. Black thread is key. I don't know why, but it seems to work really well, especially if you have a tie that's a little bit darker, or that you have a dark pattern here that you can actually cover up the thread with. If you weave in and out of the dark portions, you're actually going to hide the thread. So the best stitch, and I don't know the names of stitches, I don't know types of stitches, but the way that I figured out is if you go up with the needle, and then you go almost immediately right back down. What that's going to do is it's going to leave a very, very, very small little spot where you stitched. And then you can go much wider underneath, so you don't have to make these tiny stitches all the way up the tie. So what you're making is your big stitch is actually underneath the tie here. So it's not going to be able to be seen. You can see on this one, it's almost impossible to see the places that I've stitched. If you look really closely, you can see the little tiny black marks, but you see how tiny they are. It's very small. And you want to make them as small as possible because the smaller they are, the less likely they're going to be seen. And you can see right there, especially from a distance, you're never going to be able to see that. And also, one thing to remember is this is the back of the tie. Doesn't really matter. People aren't going to see it at all. It's really just for you to know that you did a good job. And, you know, some of us can get pretty finicky about details here. So once you get the tie to the point where it's looking like this, you want to turn it over and you want to look at the shape and say, all right, this is the shape that I'm going for. Everything looks symmetrical. There's no weird wrinkly stuff in there that's going on. Give it another good iron, because if not, again, those creases are going to go away. You're going to have to iron several times, and I mean hold that iron on there for a while. Finally, the last thing that you can do is you can go ahead and you can reattach both your label and your little tab that you're going to use to hold the tie together. I wish I could tell you there was a good way to do this. Unfortunately, this can be a little challenging because you have these little tiny tabs that stitch onto the tie, and that's all. So there's not a lot of room to work. So I don't care where you put this. My recommendation is maybe a quarter of the way up the tie. It doesn't really matter. Find a place. The important part is that it's going to be proportionate to this. You don't want any of these ends hanging over the tie, or else you're going to see that. My experience has been that you just take the needle up on the sides, right through the tabs, once or twice. That's all it takes, just a couple of stitches. And then put the other side on. Once you get the hang of it, it's not too bad. And then go ahead and apply your label here. Now, you can put the label anywhere you want, but you definitely want to reapply it. It gives it that old vintage feel. It makes it look more authentic and not so much like a craft project that you did. So if it goes well, the first time might be a little bit tough, but after that, you're going to get the hang of it. It's really not that difficult. It takes a little bit of time. It takes a lot of patience, but at the end, you're going to have a really, really awesome skinny tie. And I know I'm going to be wearing that paisley one now, which I never would have been able to do before. So I hope that this helps you. I hope that now you'll be able to make something out of some of your dad's ties or your grandfather's ties or your thrift store ties or whatever. And it really opens it up so that you don't have to go spend a fortune at the tailor or Nordstrom's or whatever to pay somebody to make the tie smaller. So I hope this works for you. And go ahead and give it a try.